Imagine this. 17-year-old Ellie Harper, eyes bright with the thrill of her new driver's license, pulls up to her grandparents' cozy Oregon home for their annual Thanksgiving feast. She's clutching a tray of homemade pumpkin cookies, her heart racing with pride. She drove herself this year, a big step for a shy teen. But when the door swings open, her grandmother's face falls. "Ellie, honey, there's no room at the table," she says, her voice clipped. 30 guests, cousins, neighbors, even a random coworker, fill the house, laughter spilling out, but Ellie's told there's no chair, no plate, not even a corner for her. Stunned, she forces a smile, leaves her cookies, and drives 40 miles back home through a foggy November night. Alone in her quiet kitchen, she eats a stale bagel and a bruised apple, her Thanksgiving dinner. This isn't just a mix-up. It's a wound that cuts deep, one that will unravel a family's hidden truths. Stick with me, because this story of betrayal and strength will leave you speechless. If you're already hooked, hit that like button, drop a comment, share this with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe for more raw, real stories like this. The fog clung to Ellie's windshield as she navigated the winding roads home, her hands trembling on the wheel. She'd practiced her arrival speech, eager to show her grandparents, Marge and Vernon, how grown-up she felt. But their dismissal stung like a slap. 30 people, including a coworker she'd never met, but no space for her? At home, she curled up on the couch, her overnight bag untouched, the sweater she'd chosen to impress Marge still folded inside. The bagel she nibbled sat heavy in her stomach, the apple's tartness mirroring her hurt. Meanwhile, Sarah Harper, Ellie's mom, was in the ICU, fighting to save a patient who'd crashed twice that night. Exhausted, she trudged home at 2 a.m., expecting Ellie to be safe at her grandparents'. But the sight of Ellie's boots by the door stopped her cold. "Ellie," she called, her voice tight with dread. Ellie's eyes fluttered open, her voice small. "They said there wasn't room, Mom." Sarah's heart cracked. She'd spent years giving everything to her family, and this is how they repaid her. The bagel on the counter wasn't just a meal. It was a symbol of their cruelty. Sarah Harper stood frozen in her dimly lit living room, the weight of her ICU shift still clinging to her like damp scrubs. The sight of her daughter Ellie, curled tightly on the couch, hit her harder than any patient's flatline. Ellie's voice trembled as she recounted her Thanksgiving rejection. "Grandma said there was no room, Mom. Not at the table, not anywhere." Sarah's eyes fell on the stale bagel and half-eaten apple on the counter, Ellie's makeshift holiday meal. Her heart twisted, a mix of protective rage and aching guilt. She'd trusted her parents, Marge and Vernon, to give Ellie the warmth of family while she saved lives. Instead, they'd sent her 17-year-old daughter driving alone through the fog, dismissed like an uninvited guest. Sarah knelt beside Ellie, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I showed up on time," Ellie whispered, her voice cracking. "I even brought cookies. Grandma looked at me like I was extra." The word hung heavy, a knife in Sarah's chest. She'd spent years pouring money and love into her family, paying their bills, buying their house, only to see them wound her daughter. As Ellie leaned into her, Sarah's exhaustion gave way to a quiet fire. This wasn't just a holiday snub. It was a betrayal that exposed decades of ingratitude. She held Ellie close, the bagel's crumbs a stark reminder of the family's cruelty, and vowed silently, no more. The ICU had taught her to act fast when something was broken. Now, her family's actions demanded a reckoning, one that would shake their comfortable world to its core. Sarah Harper's hands trembled as she tucked a blanket around Ellie, still asleep on the couch, the sting of her daughter's rejection burning in her chest. The quiet house felt like a held breath, but Sarah's mind raced back through years of sacrifice that led to this moment. Growing up in a small Oregon town, Sarah was always the odd one, the girl who'd rather dissect frogs than cheer at football games. Her sister Denise called her nurse nerd to anyone who'd laugh, while her parents, Marge and Vernon, barely hid their embarrassment over her science obsession. "Why can't you be normal?" Marge once snapped when Sarah asked for a chemistry set at 10. By high school, Sarah was studying during TV commercials, earning a full-ride scholarship to nursing school while Denise charmed her way to family favorite Sarah worked graveyard shifts at diners, her feet blistered to pay for textbooks, never getting a dime from her parents. As an ICU nurse, she became their lifeline, buying them a modest house, covering their mortgage, utilities, even Vernon's heart meds. They never visited her, never thanked her, yet expected more. A car repair, a cousin's dental bill. Sarah gave, believing family meant duty. But now, seeing Ellie's pain, those years of one-sided giving felt like a trap. Her family's resentment, calling her nurse moneybags behind her back, had festered, and excluding Ellie was their cruelest jab yet. As dawn crept through the blinds, Sarah's resolve hardened. She'd built their world, but they'd shattered hers. The bagel crumbs on the counter whispered of their ingratitude, and Sarah knew this was no longer about pleasing them. It was about protecting what truly mattered. The pale morning light filtered through Sarah Harper's kitchen, casting shadows on the untouched bagel crumbs from Ellie's lonely Thanksgiving. Sarah sat at the counter, her coffee cold, replaying her daughter's quiet words. They looked at me like I was extra. The sting wasn't just Ellie's rejection. It was the final crack in a dam Sarah had held up for years. Weeks earlier, her sister Denise had called, voice syrupy, begging Sarah to fund her daughter Nora's $25,000 art program. "She's got your talent," Denise cooed, as if Sarah's success was a family aim. Sarah said no, her voice steady but firm, citing the house payments and medical bills she already covered for Marge and Vernon. Denise's tone turned venomous. "You're just jealous Nora's going places." Sarah hung up, thinking that was the end. But Thanksgiving proved otherwise. Excluding Ellie wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated slap, a message that Sarah's boundaries came with a price, and her daughter paid it. The memory of Ellie's cookies, left behind like an offering to a family that didn't care, burned in Sarah's mind. She'd spent decades swallowing their jabs, nurse nerd, nurse moneybags, while bankrolling their lives. No more. The ICU had taught her to spot a lost cause, and her family's entitlement was terminal. As Ellie slept upstairs, Sarah's resolve crystallized. They'd hurt her daughter to punish her, banking on her silence. But Sarah wasn't the awkward girl they mocked anymore. She was a mother, a nurse, a woman done with their games. The house she'd bought them, the bills she'd paid, they'd taken it all for granted. Now they'd face the cost of their cruelty. Sarah stood, her decision made. The first spark of defiance igniting a plan that would turn their world upside down. The Oregon air was crisp the morning after Thanksgiving, the world still groggy from holiday cheer, but Sarah Harper's heart pounded with a clarity that cut through the haze. She stood on her parents' porch, the house she'd bought them glowing with leftover festive lights, and slipped a formal eviction notice into the doorframe. It wasn't just paper, it was a grenade, primed to shatter the fragile facade of her family's entitlement. Sarah had spent years funding Marge and Vernon's life, mortgage, utilities, even their cable TV, while they mocked her as nurse moneybags. But turning Ellie away from Thanksgiving, leaving her to drive home alone with nothing but a bagel, was the final betrayal. As Sarah drove away with her husband, Liam, his hand steady on hers, the silence between them hummed with resolve. Hours later, Marge found the notice. Her scream, sharp, raw. "Vernon, she's kicking us out," echoed down the street. Vernon stumbled out, still in yesterday's sweater, face red with disbelief. Denise, bleary-eyed in holiday pajamas, clutched her coffee mug like a shield, yelling, "What's Sarah done now?" The family's outrage erupted like a storm, accusations of ingratitude flying as if Sarah owed them her soul. But Sarah didn't flinch. She'd given them everything, money, time, love, only to see them wound her daughter. The notice wasn't revenge. It was a line in the sand. Ellie's tear-streaked face, her quiet, "They didn't want me," fueled Sarah's fire. As Marge tore into the phone, calling Sarah ungrateful, the irony was thick. They'd never thanked her for the roof over their heads. Sarah hung up, her heart steady. The family thought she'd cave as always. They were wrong. This notice was just the start of a reckoning they couldn't ignore. The fog had lifted, but tension hung heavy as Sarah Harper stood on her porch 2 days after Thanksgiving, facing her mother, Marge, who clutched the crumpled eviction notice like a weapon. Marge's fuzzy robe, a Black Friday bargain she loved to brag about, flapped in the chilly Oregon breeze. "You're really doing this," she hissed, her voice a mix of disbelief and venom. "After all we've done for you." Sarah's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm, cutting sharper for it. "You mean the house I bought? The bills I paid? Or how you sent Ellie home to eat a bagel alone on Thanksgiving?" Marge flinched, just for a second before her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic. We didn't have room." Sarah stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. 30 people, Marge. You had room for a coworker, but not my daughter." The silence was deafening, broken only by Marge's theatrical rip of the notice, tearing it in half as if that could erase the truth. "Pay for Nora's art program and we'll forgive you," Marge said, her smile smug like she'd won. Sarah's heart pounded, not with doubt but with clarity. They didn't see her, not as the nurse who'd saved lives, not as the daughter who'd bankrolled their comfort, and certainly not as a mother protecting her child. Marge's denial, her refusal to even mention Ellie's pain, was the final proof of their selfishness. Sarah didn't shout or beg. She just nodded, closing the door softly as Marge muttered her way back to the car. Inside, Sarah leaned against the wall, Ellie's hurt face flashing in her mind. They thought she'd back down, stay the dutiful daughter. But the torn paper on her porch wasn't the end. It was the spark of a fight they'd never see coming. The Oregon winter settled in, cold and unyielding, much like Sarah Harper's resolve as she sat across from her lawyer in a small, fluorescent-lit office. The eviction notice she'd left on her parents' doorstep had been met with denial. Marge's theatrical tearing of the paper, Vernon's bellowed threats, but Sarah was done waiting for remorse. She laid out the truth. 7 years of paying the mortgage on their house, covering utilities, even footing the bill for Vernon's heart meds, all while they mocked her as nurse moneybags, and sent Ellie home from Thanksgiving with nothing but a bagel. The lawyer nodded, unfazed. "Formal eviction, 60 days, he confirmed, drafting the notice with a stamp that felt like a gavel strike. Sarah cut off all support, cable, medical reimbursements, everything, leaving Marge and Vernon to face the reality of their dependence. When they refused to move, Sarah listed the house for sale, priced fairly to sever ties cleanly. A young family snapped it up, drawn to the quiet neighborhood, but their offer came with a condition: vacant possession. The legal process rolled forward, relentless. Sarah didn't attend the eviction day. She didn't need to see Marge's tears or Vernon's curses to know it was messy. Denise, her sister, took them in briefly, only to crumble under their complaints. Too cramped, too loud, too much. Sarah's phone buzzed with desperate texts from Denise. "Help with their rent, just a deposit." Sarah's reply was simple. "You stood by while they hurt Ellie. This is my choice." The house sold, the money secured Ellie's future, and Sarah's family learned what life without her looked like. They'd banked on her guilt, her loyalty. But Sarah, forged in the ICU's high-stakes chaos, wasn't bending. The sale wasn't just a transaction. It was freedom from a family that chose cruelty over gratitude. 2 years later, the Oregon sun bathed Sarah Harper's porch in a golden glow as she and Ellie sat side by side, sipping iced tea, the air sweet with summer's calm. Ellie, now 19, was thriving. Her college dreams funded by the house sale, her confidence blooming like the wildflowers in their yard. "I don't miss them," she said softly, her voice free of the weight that once clung to her after that lonely Thanksgiving. Sarah smiled, her heart full, no longer tethered to the family that had dismissed them both. Marge and Vernon, now in a crumbling rental with a crooked front step and a single space heater, still pointed fingers, blaming Sarah for their struggles. Denise, after briefly housing them, had kicked them out, unable to handle their endless complaints. They'd tried rallying cousins and uncles with tales of Sarah's cruelty, but Sarah had quietly shared the truth. Scanned bills, the eviction notice, Ellie's bagel dinner. The family's sympathy dried up. A cousin's curt, "wow" text said it all. Sarah's phone buzzed occasionally with bitter messages from unknown numbers, but she deleted them without a flicker of doubt. The house sale hadn't just cut financial ties. It had bought peace, closure, a future where Ellie could shine without her grandparents' shadow. Sarah leaned back, the iced tea cool in her hand, and felt the weight of years. Mockery, sacrifice, betrayal, lift. They'd called Ellie extra, but Sarah had shown them what it meant to be essential. Her family's run-down rental, their fading complaints, were no longer her burden. She'd chosen her daughter, her peace, and never looked back. The porch, the laughter, the quiet, they were enough. The sun dipped low, painting the Oregon sky in hues of peach and lavender as Sarah and Ellie lingered on their porch, the world soft and still around them. 2 years had passed since that fateful Thanksgiving, since Sarah drew a line that reshaped their lives. Ellie, now a college freshman studying biology, carried a spark that no family rejection could dim. The money from the house sale had paved her path. Tuition, books, a future free of the chains Sarah once bore. Sarah herself felt lighter, unburdened by the family who'd taken her generosity and returned only scorn. Marge and Vernon's calls had slowed to a trickle, their texts ignored, their narratives of victimhood falling on deaf ears. Sarah had protected what mattered, Ellie's heart, her own dignity. The cousins, once quick to judge, now sent occasional messages of respect, some even admiration. Sarah didn't need their approval. She had her daughter's smile, her own quiet strength. The rental where her parents now lived, with its sagging floors and flickering lights, was a consequence they'd built themselves. Sarah sipped her tea, the ice clinking softly, and felt a peace she hadn't known in decades. This wasn't revenge. It was release. She'd chosen love over obligation, and the porch, bathed in twilight, held the proof of that choice. If this story of courage and redemption moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with family? Let's talk about it. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for more stories that hit you right in the heart. Your support keeps these tales alive.